It's Brunchin with Marinaro on this Sunday, January 23rd. Happy 83rd birthday to my father. And the show is presented by Cherry River Hard Seltzer. Only 90 calories, natural flavors, no preservatives. Now available in Quebec grocery stores and at the beer store. From the Montreal Gazette and hockeyinsideout.com. Stu Cowan, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Tony. How are you?
Very, very well. Who were those Montreal Canadiens in Colorado last night?
Yeah, the effort's there. It seems to be since the new GM was put in place, the effort level has risen, which I guess isn't shocking considering these guys want to impress the new boss. Giving up a lot of shots, but the really bright spot is that the two goalies, Montembeault and Primo, have looked really good. And the pressure was definitely on Primo going into last night's game after the back-to-back performances by Montembeault. Who's the goalie of the future on this team? Is it going to be Caden Primo? Could Sam Montembeault work his way into that picture? He certainly looked like he did the way he played the last two games.
Caden Primo faced 46 shots yesterday when all was said and done. The Colorado Avalanche beat the Montreal Canadiens by a score of 3-2 in overtime. But what a performance by him. He faced 23 shots in period number one. And Stu, Caden Primo is a former 7th round pick, 199th overall. But I have to tell you, I have been the president of the Caden Primo fan club since 2017, 2018, which I believe was his first season at Northeastern. I thought then that this guy was the real deal. I thought last year he was the real deal. I thought when he had bad games this year, he was the real deal. And I think going forward, he's the guy. I've always thought that he's the guy. And look, only time will tell. But based on the goaltending the Canadiens have had in the last week, okay, and I know a week is not a season, I want somebody to convince me now that the Canadiens still need Carey Price at $10.5 million a year for the next 4 years going forward. I want somebody to convince me of that.
I think they're going to – Kent Hughes has got to try and trade him, but can you trade him? I mean, I don't think you can trade him anywhere until he comes back and shows he can still play. I mean, this knee injury thing just keeps getting more bizarre that he's right back apparently to step one in his rehab because he missed a week while the team was locked out. It's not a good sign. I mean, they're talking about how there's still swelling coming on the knee. This is normally considered not a major surgery, a meniscus. Even after the surgery, the Canadiens said that they expected him to be back to start the season. In fact, they were confident he would be back to start the season. And here we are, 6 months after the surgery, and he's still not on the ice. So I don't see how they can trade him until he comes back and proves that both physically and mentally he's ready to play, and that he can play somewhere near, if not at the level he was at during the playoffs last season. Plus, he has a no movement clause. Plus, he has a $10.5 million cap hit. It's easy to say you're going to move on from Carey Price, but it's not going to be easy to do.
No, it's not going to be easy to do. A couple of days ago, I had a chance to speak with, as you know, Bill Guerin, the general manager of the Minnesota Wild. Kent Hughes brought up his name at the presser when he was introduced as the 18th general manager of Montreal Canadiens history. He said he had a telephone conversation with Bill Guerin. Bill Guerin told him, hey, what are you thinking about? This is a no-brainer. The Montreal Canadiens are the New York Yankees. They're the Dallas Cowboys. They're the Montreal Canadiens. So I picked up the phone and I called him, and Bill Guerin told me that everything Kent Hughes said at the press conference, he watched the press conference, he agreed with. So they share, it seems, similar philosophies and a similar vision. It should be noted that Bill Guerin, when he took over as general manager of the Minnesota Wild, there were a couple of contracts there that were deemed untradeable, right? Zach Parise was one, and Ryan Suter was the other. And if memory serves me well, 23 months after he was appointed general manager, he bought out both contracts. Now, I don't know if that, that's the way it's going to go down with Kent Hughes, with Carey Price, and or Jeff Petrie. But Carey Price won't be here very long. Where there's a will, there's a way. It'll be tough to trade him, but I'm convinced that Kent Hughes is not going to have a goalie who's a declining asset, who's getting older, who's injury prone, eat up $10.5 million on his cap. I'm convinced of that.
Well, that interview you did with Guerin was fantastic. I listened to it, and I liked at the end when you asked him, what's the one piece of advice you would give Kent Hughes? And he said, just do what you think is right. Don't worry about what other people are going to think or say or what the media is going to think. Just do what you think is right. And that's what Guerin did when he went in there. He did what he felt was right, and the results are showing now. And the thing with Kent Hughes, he's a smart guy. And I think coming into this GM position, the fact he was an agent and an agent for so long, people talk he doesn't have experience as a GM, which is right. But I think he has the experience he has as an agent is even more valuable coming into this chair because he knows how players think. He can relate to the younger players. He's had Patrice Bergeron as a client since the beginning of his career. He had Vinny Lecavalier. These players talk to him not only about how they're playing, but about some of their teammates. I don't like this guy. He's got a bad attitude. I don't like this guy. I don't like this. Like he has more inside information on the NHL than a guy who had just been a GM coming into this position. I think that's really going to help him moving forward. I think Marc Bergevin had a really hard time relating to the younger generation of hockey players. I think he couldn't relate to PK Subban. The way the Pacioretty situation ended here was disgraceful. Mark, there's so many players that it became a personal feud with. And I think that Kent Hughes has much better people skills than Marc Bergevin. Let's put it that way. And I think that's going to help him a lot in this new job.
He also talked about what a modern coach is, right, at his press conference. So when he talks to players, they also talk to him about what kind of coach they like and what a coach does that they like and what a coach does that they don't like and all that stuff. Why don't we do this? Because this show belongs to the people, of course, and sharing is caring. We'll get to your questions. Ask them, and we're going to try and answer them to the best of our abilities. Let's go to the questions right now. MJV, what's Ducharme have against playing McNiven? He deserves a chance to get in some games. I'll tackle it first, Stu, and say, yes, I agree. But Montembeault really turned it on. And by the way, now he's out with a wrist injury. We don't know how long he'll be out. It's kind of crazy because Jake Allen is out and Carey Price is out. And now, they're taking a look at who their guys could be in the organization. Montembeault impressed them. He played better. He deserved the opportunity to play more games. Caden Primo could be the goalie of the future. They'll look at McNiven now over the next little while, you would think. But yes, I agree with the question, but I also agree that Montembeault and Caden Primo have deserved their opportunity to be seen as well.
Yeah, I think McNiven might get a start. I think, McNiven spoke out not that long ago against the organization, how frustrated he was with the position he was in. I think if Marc Bergevin was still GM, McNiven would not get a start. As I said, Bergevin had a bad habit of making things personal. As one person I respect in the hockey world told me once, Marc Bergevin, when he puts an X beside your name, he doesn't have an eraser. You can't get rid of it. So now with McNiven, it's a fresh start. Kent Hughes is coming in, and he's going to, I'm sure, want to look at everybody he can. And, with the injury situation with Jake Allen and Carey Price, I'd be surprised at this point if Carey Price plays this season. I think we'll see McNiven in the net, but you're right. Caden Primo is still, I think, the goalie of the future for this team. But Sam Montembeault has put his name in there. He's only 3 years older than Primo. And you mentioned earlier that Primo was a 7th-round pick. Well, yeah. Montembeault was a 3rd-round pick. So as a prospect coming up, there was, Primo was a 7th-round pick because there's holes in his game, obviously, or there were holes in his game. He's a late bloomer. One NHL scout told me once, scouts are right most of the time. They make mistakes here and there. But if a guy was a 7th-round pick, usually at some point along the way, they'll show why they were a 7th-round pick. Having said that, Primo could be a late bloomer. And my thing with him, sometimes he looked a little bit like deer in the headlights when he's been playing for the Canadians. And I think he just needs to get more comfortable, more confident. And I think that game last night probably went a long way because there's no doubt in the back of his mind. He's thinking, oh, man, Montembeault played really well the last 2 games. Like, I can't not have a good game tonight.
Oh, for sure.
He accepted the challenge, and he was right there.
In front of his new boss, who you would think, by the way, his kids weren't at Northeastern when Caden Primo was at Northeastern. But Jordan Harris was, who he knows very well, and he's coached. And all the coaching staff and all part of the entire hockey team at Northeastern are all buddies with Kent Hughes. And of course, he lived in Massachusetts, and Northeastern is right there. So you would think that Kent Hughes has had one or two pretty good scouting reports on Caden Primo going back a while. So there's some familiarity there. There's no doubt about it. Back to more questions.
The other thing, though, Tony, too, with Kent Hughes as an agent, he was also scouting. He was a scout. He was scouting for future clients for his business. Of course.
So
he's seen all the, he knows all these guys. You mentioned Jordan Harris. He coached Jordan Harris in minor hockey for 3 years in the Boston area, so he knows them really well.
Lucas Gray, hey, Tony, Tyler Toffoli's on a team-friendly contract and the most consistent Habs player. If he were to get traded, what return would you expect? I wouldn't trade him. Mm-hmm. So that's it. I wouldn't trade him. And I'll tell you why. When I look at trading players, and I take a look at this Canadiens team that wants to reset, revamp, rebuild, whatever you want to call it, all depends on how things go and how lucky they get. I'm looking at trading players that are 30-plus years of age, making a lot of money, have played their best hockey, have bad contracts. Tyler Toffoli is under 30. He's playing good hockey. He's on very good term, and he's on a very good contract. And he's got chemistry with Suzuki, and you need to build something going forward as well. And you need to have some leadership on the team. I'm not trading Tyler Toffoli.
I agree with you 100%, Tony. And if you notice, Toffoli's had an A on his sweater this season. There is leadership there. Him and Suzuki have a great relationship together. Remember that Players Tribune story that Toffoli did when talked about one of the reasons he came to Montreal is he wanted to play with Nick Suzuki. The other thing that I really like about Tyler Toffoli, you hear about how many players don't want to come to Quebec and don't want to play for the Canadiens, and their families don't want to come here. Their wives don't want to come here. One of the most fun things this season on social media has been following Toffoli's wife, experiencing life in Montreal and having fun.
She's in Quebec City now, I think.
She's in Quebec City doing the luge run or whatever yesterday. She did that one where she was out on her balcony with a bucket of water and threw it in the air and watched it turn into snow, thinking it was the coolest thing ever. This is a California woman who used to work for the LA Dodgers.
Talking about how much she loves Montreal, Quebec, and the province of Quebec. Meanwhile, there are others who talk about how difficult it is in Quebec and that they'd probably want to be elsewhere right now.
Well, she's embraced everything about the city right from when she first came here. I remember she went on Twitter and said, "Could anybody got restaurant recommendations or places we can go or things we can do?" And if you don't follow her on Twitter, you should. People who aren't, it's a lot of fun just watching her experiencing Montreal as a California girl coming to Montreal and loving.
I'm going to take it a step further because things change as they go, and I know that Brendan Gallagher is the popular choice. Tyler Toffoli wouldn't make a bad captain. Think about it. He came here on a 4-year deal. After this year, he'll have 2 years left on his contract. If you name Nick Suzuki, it may be too much too soon. You have 2 years of Toffoli and then a transition, and then maybe by then, Suzuki is ready. Maybe they go out and they sign an unrestricted free agent who becomes the next captain. Maybe it's going to be Joel Edmondson. Maybe it will be Gallagher. I think Gallagher might get traded going forward. I'm not saying it's going to happen this year, but it could happen next year, and then do you trade your captain? I wouldn't be surprised if Tyler Toffoli is the next captain of the Canadiens.
That's interesting. I mean, my pick was Gallagher even when before Shea Weber was named captain. I thought Gallagher just because, a big part of being captain is dealing with us in the media, and Shea Weber always hated it. I mean, we haven't heard a word from Shea Weber since the Stanley Cup final last season. I thought Gallagher, just for everything that's expected of a captain of the Canadiens, I think he was, to me, the best pick. I still think he is at this point. You mentioned the injury issues. Like, is Gallagher going to want to be here for a rebuild? And injury-wise, is he going to be healthy enough to be able to trade if he doesn't?
Yeah.
If he does want to stay here for a rebuild, I still think Brendan Gallagher would be my captain, but I can understand why you would have Toffoli's name out there.
I'm very disappointed in Shea Weber, and for all that's been said about him, and Stu, you've pumped his tires, I pumped his tires. We've talked about all the different forms of leadership, but on this one occasion here, not addressing the fan base in over 7 months, this is not leadership. No, he dropped the ball, and the Canadiens dropped the ball.
I'm not I'm not, from having dealt with Shea Weber on a day-to-day basis, I'm not surprised at all that he hasn't done it. I am surprised the Canadians have allowed him not to do it. As I said, it's part of the job. Can you imagine the captain of any other team in the NHL being in this situation and never once speaking to the media? And as I've said, I don't care if Shea Weber doesn't want to talk to me or the media, but he's talking to the fans through the media. On a Hockey Night in Canada last night, after that feud in Edmonton with Draisaitl and Jim Matheson, they had a clip from Mark Messier, and Mark Messier said, Mark Messier Leadership Award in the NHL said, you have to realize when you're talking to the media, you're talking to the fans. And Shea Weber never understood that. Or if he did understand that, like maybe just didn't care. And that's why I always thought right from the beginning that Brendan Gallagher would have been a better captain than Shea Weber. Let Shea Weber be the leader in the room, or the guy the respected leader in the room, but let Brendan Gallagher be the voice of the team. And Brendan Gallagher has been the voice of that locker.
Yeah.
People knock Max Pacioretty, or a lot of people knocked Max Pacioretty when he was here.
Yeah.
Max Pacioretty never hid from the media, ever. Whether he had 3 goals, whether he was -6, he was sitting in his stall waiting after every single game. He answered questions. One of the downfalls of him as a captain, he said his skin was too thin. He listened to everything, and he let comments affect them. I had one, I don't want to say an altercation, but one disagreement with Max. He was upset about something I wrote. We sat one-on-one. We talked about it. We worked it out. We got along great after that. But Max Pacioretty accepted all the responsibilities that came with being captain of the Montreal Canadiens. And a lot of times it's not fun. It's not easy. You have a bad game, you're -5, and the last thing you want to do is have to answer questions from us guys. But he did it. He was always there. And I'll always remember that about Max Pacioretty, and I'll defend him. There's, in some ways, he wasn't a natural born leader. His skin was a little too thin. I think he heard everything that was going on, but he understood what it meant to be a captain, and he filled all those responsibilities.
Good for you that you guys patched up. I reported that he was going to get traded back in late November, and I said that he wouldn't be the captain by the Montreal Canadiens golf tournament. They traded him the day before. He never spoke to me again. All right, let's go to the questions. I thought that was funny. It's a true story. Matty Greggs, what is Shane Wright's NHL comparable? Ryan O'Reilly or a poor man's Bergeron? That's what I'm hearing from scouts. By the way, he hasn't played well as of late, and his number 1 pick overall is now in question. That's why I'm no longer wearing don't worry about it, it's all going to be all right. I'm not wearing that. No pain, no shame. I'm not wearing that until he plays better. Stu, the next one's for you. Andy Zaff says, the last 3 games have proved you can tank with pride. Your thoughts on who the assistant GM should or will be, Stu?
Exactly. I mean, with the quality or the lack of quality the Canes have right now because of injuries, because of COVID, because of everything else, it's going to be difficult for them to win games. But play with pride. I mean, Jake Allen talked about that. Play with pride. You're still wearing a CH on your shirt. Play with pride for the name on the front of your shirt and the name on the back of your shirt. You're in the NHL. How many guys would kill themselves basically to try and get in the NHL? You're there. Show a little heart. Show a little passion. Compete going forward. As far as the assistant GM, I'm wondering if it might be Daniel Briere, just because he was one of the 3 finalists. I can't see Matthew Darche leaving his position as director of hockey operations in Tampa to be an assistant GM here. But Daniel Briere, I could see him maybe coming here and see him maybe running the Laval Rocket as the assistant GM and being in charge of the Rocket.
That would be that'd be great. Look, Mark Denis, another name, but Daniel Briere has a little bit more experience at that level, and I wouldn't be surprised to see either or. Look, the guys that are going to run the Canadians are going to be Gordon and Hughes, right? Mm-hmm. You need someone to really run the American Hockey League team and work together with the other 2 gentlemen. So I think you threw out a good name there. All right, more questions coming in from Maurice Richard, who I'm not so sure is Maurice Richard, but if he is, it's a pretty cool name. Montreal always had a problem getting free agents to come play in Montreal. Do you think Kent could change that?
The best way to change that is to have a winning team. It's going to take a while to have a winning team here. It's still a difficult sell. It really is. I think he has great people skills, so I think he can do a better job of selling it maybe than the previous administration. But, people talk about Cory Perry. How did the Canadians let Cory Perry get away? They get a 2-year. If the Canadians offered Cory Perry a 2-year offer and Tampa offered him the 2-year offer, which they did, I still wouldn't be surprised if Cory Perry went to Tampa. There was a great story on The Athletic about Cory Perry recently, and they showed you him fishing with his son off the pier in his backyard to the lake. Like, that's tough. That's a big selling point where you're trying to get a guy. You can either go back home to the South Shore home and shovel snow in Montreal, or you can go fishing with your son in your backyard. So it's always going to be a tough sell. The best way to sell it is to have a team that has a chance to win the Stanley Cup. They don't have that right now. So even with Kent Hughes, it's still a tough sell getting free agents to come here.
You're right about that. If you live in LaSalle like me and he goes to his backyard, there's no fishing there. He's gonna find one backyard with tomatoes and another one with basil, like 2 feet away from my house. All right, okay. Where are we going now? Backyard like this big. Can't even fit in a pool. Kyle Whiteman, Tony Marinaro, and Stu, do you think Jonathan Drouin will be a part of the future? What do you think is a reasonable return if Hughes puts him on the trade block? My opinion, next year in his final year of his contract, trade deadline day or a week before, Jonathan Drouin will be traded from the Montreal Canadiens. I do not see the Jonathan Drouin Montreal Canadiens marriage lasting much longer.
I agree with you on that, Tony. And what will they get? It'll depend on how well Jonathan Drouin plays between now and then. But I think, was it 5 years he would have contract? I believe it was.
5 years.
Time here has come.
Pardon me. 6 years.
Yeah.
$5.5 million a year, $33 million contract before he played a game with the Canadiens. They had it signed.
His time here will pass, and I think from Jonathan Drouin's standpoint, from everything he went through last season, he might want to have a fresh start somewhere else too, without the constant spotlight on him that he has here in Montreal.
By the way, that trade, we know that Radulov, they weren't going to bring him back. And yes, we know they had to replace Radulov. But the reason why they targeted Drouin was they wanted a French star. And they thought he could be that guy. And by the way, I thought he was going to be that guy too. Safe to say that I'm not happy overall with the way the last 5 years have gone.
Well, the first red flag that came up with Drouin, Tony, was when he was 19 or whatever, and they sent him to the AHL and he went on strike.
Yeah.
I mean, that was a red flag right there, I think. And Steve Yzerman saw that red flag. And I think from that day forward, he was thinking, how am I going to move this guy? And then Marc Bergevin is GM. If you're going to move him, the best chance to move him is to a team looking for a French star, right? And that's what happened.
So what I was getting at was they acquired Drouin, and on the day that they introduce him at his presser, they make him sign a 6-year, $33 million deal, right? That was more for the fans than it was for the hockey team. And so if I can give Kent Hughes advice, do what's best for the hockey team and not what's best for a sector of fans or a sector of media. Because that one there didn't work out very good.
The advice that you had from
Bill Guerin.
Do what you think is right. Don't worry about anything else. Great advice.
More questions. Sharing is caring. Share this video. Comment on the Habs questions. Glenn Delaney, what are your thoughts on Pizzetta? Do you think he's earning a spot on next year's team? Stu?
If he's not earning a spot with the Canadiens, I think he's earning a spot probably, or a chance with another NHL team anyway. It's hard not to like the guy. I mean, he's a character. He's got personality, and he's got 4 goals. He's got 3 more goals than Cole Caulfield or Yoel Army have this season. Why? He goes to the hard areas. He scored 1 goal with his face. He works hard. He's a bit of a throwback to the tough guy days. I mean, he can fight if he has to, but there's hardly any fighting in the NHL today. But you notice him when he's on the ice. He throws his body around. He's not afraid to hit. He wasn't afraid to fight Ryan Reeves. He's got courage. He goes to the net. He goes to hard areas. On a 4th line, I think there's a spot for him, if not with the Canadiens, with another NHL team.
He's in the mold of a Tom Kostopoulos and those guys. Just go in, they work hard, and look, he's in the mix because you'll catch him, you'll get him at under $1 million. He's on a 2-way deal this year and paying him $750, I believe, in the National Hockey League. He stands up for his teammates. He goes to the dirty areas. He works hard. His energy is contagious. He tries to wake up the team. So in an ideal world, those are the guys that you want on your fourth line. Now, his talent is probably he could be one of those guys who could be a 12, a 13, maybe Laval, maybe come back up and all that stuff. But I'm sure he's a guy who's appreciated by his teammates. Kind of guy you like to have on your team.
He plays with pride. He plays with pride, Tony. We were talking before. He plays with pride. Here's a guy, 6th-round draft pick, never expected to get this opportunity. He's pinching himself, I'm sure, every day when he wakes up. I'm actually in the NHL, and he's going to do everything he can to stay there. And he's been, as I said, you notice him every time he's on the ice. He plays with pride. He plays with passion. And he's been, I wrote a column this week, him and Montembeault have been two of the feel-good stories on the Canadiens this season. Speaking
of pride, Nick Suzuki stepped it up over the past couple of, it seems like, Dominic Ducharme told him something and it really got to him. And there's a new boss once again that you said that came in town and stuff like that. But I wanted to mention Suzuki. We're 25 minutes into the show. We haven't talked about his goal or assist yet. Suzuki had a good game, and Suzuki's really picked it up in the past week on the road.
Yeah, and a lot of that has to do with the Foley coming back, as we were talking about earlier. There's definitely a chemistry between those two guys, and I don't think it's a coincidence that the Foley's return has coincided with Suzuki playing the way he's been playing. Suzuki's more of a playmaker type guy, right? He needs somebody. He has great vision. He's a great passer.
Yeah.
And Toffoli's a finisher. So they have a really good combination together.
Yeah. Jeff Serginian says, with Hughes on board now, will he be able to sign Jordan Harris? So no one has any information on this. Everyone's going on a gut feel, but based on the fact that he coached Jordan Harris for 3 years, Jordan plays with Kent Hughes' sons, Riley and Jack. I mean, I'm going to say, and based on the fact there's going to be opportunity here next year, because I believe the Canadiens will trade left-handed defenseman Ben Sherratt. And so there's going to be opportunities here. There's going to be ice time that they can give him. The way Kent Hughes wants this team to play, which is going to be an offensive brand of hockey, Jordan Harris is going to be one of those puck-moving defensemen, good skating, transition game players. I say yes. And I'll say this. Prior to Kent Hughes, I said no. It looked like he was gone. And now with Kent Hughes, I'm going to say yes.
If Kent Hughes can't convince him to come to Montreal, nobody can.
That's it.
He's known him he coached them as a kid along with his sons. He knows them well. He knows the family well. The family knows him well. They trust him. So if he can't convince him to come, nobody can. But the thing you got to remember too with Harris, Boston kid, grew up as a Bruins fan. Does he want to go play for the Bruins? We'll see. But I mean, if nobody knows for sure, but if Kent Hughes can't convince him to come to Montreal, nobody was going to convince him to come to Montreal.
Can Kent Hughes convince Patrice Bergeron to come to Montreal, who's an unrestricted free agent at the end of the year?
I keep wondering about that, right? I mean, you think Bergeron's one of those guys going to play his whole career in Boston and retire there or whatever, but one of the things that appealed to Kent Hughes, and he said, he's been offered jobs as a GM before. Gordon offered him a job to come help him in New York, and he's always said no. And then after this one, he thought, man, it's the Montreal Canadiens. And that's why he wouldn't have accepted a GM offer from any other team. And for Bergeron, at this stage in his career, how many times has the opportunity come for a hometown guy to come and be GM of the Canadiens? How many times has the opportunity come for a hometown guy to come play for the Canadiens and be captain of the Canadiens? Because you think if Patrice Bergeron comes here, the C is going on his sweater right away. And Nick Suzuki has always talked about how he admires Bergeron and he wants to play a game like him. What better way to learn how to play a game like him than to be his teammate? So,
but then there's a serious decision to make on, let's just say Bergeron wants to come. Then you have to weigh the benefit of Bergeron wearing the C for a couple of years and mentoring Suzuki versus the fact that you're going to be more competitive next year and you're not going to put yourself in a very good position for the 2023 draft, which has Bedard and has Michkov, and that is the draft that has more generational players or more franchise players than the 2022 draft. So which one is more worth it?
Every draft is a crapshoot, Tony. We've had top picks who haven't worked out. Nobody thought Cole Caulfield would have 1 goal this season. He has 1 goal. Patrice Bergeron was a proven asset and a proven commodity. He's still an effective player. To me, I see absolutely zero negative in bringing Patrice Bergeron here if he wants to come. I think, it's fine to say you want to tank. It's fine to say you want the pick, but you got to create an environment in the room that doesn't accept losing, that doesn't, and Patrice Bergeron, I can't think of a better guy.
Look, Stu, I love Patrice Bergeron, right? He's one of my favorite players in the league. I'll never say, but that whole environment in the room, right? Remember when they said that Shane Weber installed a culture in the Canadiens room that even when he was going to be gone, it was going to be here for a very long time.
It didn't last long.
They're the worst team in hockey.
Yeah, you know what?
So I don't believe that. Like, I don't believe that.
People might get upset for me saying this, but one of the reasons PK Subban was traded is because the team believed he became bigger than the team. In a lot of ways, I think Carey Price and Shea Weber became bigger than the team. Just the fact that neither of them has spoken since last year's. Neither of them had any time for dealing with the media. It was sort of, they just did their own thing, and nobody told them to do differently. Like I said earlier, I'm not surprised at all Shea Weber hasn't spoken to the media yet. He hates doing it. He doesn't want to do it. I'm surprised the Canadians haven't told him you have to. It's 20 minutes out of your life. He was here not that long ago to have his knee examined or his foot examined by doctors.
He was here on a couple of occasions.
It would have been 20 minutes out of his life before the game to sit there, answer your questions, and it's over. It's done with. And you're not talking to me or you. You're talking to the fans. So in that aspect, one thing about PK is he understood his responsibility on and off the ice. He was what a salesman for the Canadians he was.
Stu, I'm going to take it a step further, all right? And I know it's a sensitive issue because Carey Price entered the Players Assistance Program and is working on his mental health. In my opinion, and I know a lot of people don't agree with this, and I don't care. They're entitled to their opinion. I'm entitled to mine. I really think I'm right, though, when I'm going to say this. I know a lot of people say that Carey Price doesn't owe anyone anything, okay? I don't need him to speak to me. What you just said, he needs to speak to the fans. He needs to speak, and that's what people don't get, right? When they say, well, he doesn't know the media anything. He needs to speak to the fans. They've embraced them as one of their own for like 12 years or whatever it is. They've been with them through the highs and through the lows. They pay his salary. They pay $200 a ticket. They go to the game. They have for the last 12 or 13 years since he got here, whatever it is. Maybe it's even more. I'm not looking at it right now. And they pay his salary. And, this year it's the Canadiens' insurance that's paying his salary. I get it, but they need to hear from him. The only way of finding out what's going on with him is to read his wife's blog. Is this a joke? No. Is this a joke?
Chantal McAbee, when she took over the job, says she wants fans to know there's heroes on this team, that they're more than just numbers and stats and whatever. And that's true. Like, people want to know, if Carey doesn't want to talk about he owes you nothing. He owes me nothing. He does owe the fans, and he does owe Jeff Molson, who gave him an $84 million contract. If he wants to, if he doesn't want to talk about his personal stuff, fine. Before the press conference, Chantal can say he's not going to talk about the issues that led him to go to the player assistance program. Fine. That's his personal life. But what's happening with his knee? Why is it taking so long to recover? Why did the Canadians say he was going to be ready to start the season? Okay, then the player assistance program came in. But so because the Bell Sports Complex in Brossard was shut for a week because of COVID, he has to restart his rehab over. You can't do any kind of rehab at home. Like, maybe there's legitimate answers to this, but we don't know. And again,
Stu, think about this. Think about this, okay? I can get a personal trainer for my son to work with him one-on-one, but they can't get someone to work with him one-on-one when the Bell Complex was shut down? Is this a joke or what? Come on. Let's stop. It's enough now. It's enough.
You know, Tony, when they announced,
enough now. It's got to stop.
after the knee surgery that he was going to be ready to start the season, you know, I wrote and I went on our HIO show and I said, I'll believe it when I see it, because they've never been right ever about when Carey Price would return from any injury. And this is just another example. And it's, you know, it's again, it's part of the job of being, people always say, oh, you guys in the media, why should they have to talk to you? We don't make the rules. The NHL wants the players to speak to us because they want to sell their product. That's why. That's why the players are mandated to speak to us after games, and because the NHL and the Canadians want to sell their product to the fans, and the way the players talk to the fans is through us in the media. That's how it works. But certain players don't either agree with that, accept that, or don't care about that. And which one is it? Like, and again, it goes back to what I was saying before with both Price and Weber, the two key guys on this team, both have a disdain, for lack of a better word, of speaking to the media, which means speaking to the fans. Brendan Gallagher, I might have told you the story on one of your previous shows. I remember one time the Habs were having a really hard season, and Gallagher was talking with us, and he did a couple of one-on-ones after his scrum, and I just said to him, Brendan, I just want to know what everybody's saying. I just want to thank you for always being so available to us, even during when times are bad. And he looked at me and said, Stu, I know when I'm talking to you, I'm talking to the fans, and I think it's important that the fans know that we care.
He gets it. He's
hard. Great. And that we really care and we have a passion, and the way we do that is by talking to you. So he gets it. That's why I was saying before that
he's great.
To me, he should have been the last captain of the team, and why he is still my pick to be captain moving forward, unless they trade him, obviously.
All right, I've been told we have a lot of questions, so why don't we? I'll take one. You take one. I'll take one. You take one. I'll take this next one. What do you think Q's first big move will be? Trading Ben Sherratt. Next one for you, Stu. Ralph Jr. Trosso. Morning, gentlemen. Let's talk time frame. How many seasons will it take the Habs to get back to the playoffs? Stu?
Well, Gorton's rebuild in New York is 3 years in, and it's looking pretty good. So I would say at least 3 years.
All right. Okay. Ryan Katz. Kent Hughes has promised a new captain next year. If Gallagher is traded, who do you give it to? I think Toffoli's starting to make a real good case for himself. And by the way, so would Joel Edmondson. But Joel Edmondson might want to play for a winner as well. Maybe he might not. Maybe he has one cup and he wants to stay here. But I take a look at Edmondson's contract. I take a look at Toffoli's contract. And I think that gives them an advantage over Gallagher, because Gallagher's contract will have 5 more years on it at $6.5 million. And I think he'll be moved at some point. I don't know when.
Let me add one thing here quick, Tony.
Yeah.
I think one of the big mistakes Mark Bergevin did this season was not naming a captain.
Well,
I think there was a lack of leadership. I think, how can Shea Weber be sitting on his couch back in Kelowna and be captain of this team? And it goes back to what I was saying again before. I mean, in previous years, you know, the captain was out, somebody else wore the C. Alex Kovalev wore the C for the Canadians at one point. So, like, is it that intimidation of Shea Weber, or is it like, I don't get it. The guy wasn't going to play all year. His career's probably over. Make somebody else the leader. Like, put the C on somebody else's sweater. I don't understand why they didn't. And it was refreshing to hear Kent Hughes say, yeah, you need a leader. You need a captain.
Yeah, you know what? I probably agreed with it at the time, but I think time has shown now that the decision to go with no captain was not a good one. I'll give you that. Stu, this one's for you from Simon Jolicoeur. How much, if at all, has Petrie's value dropped?
It's dropped, but I don't know how much. I mean, it's not, the playoffs weren't that long ago when he played so well with a broken finger. Petrie looks like a guy who's just not happy here anymore. You know, he's already spoken out against the system and confusion on the ice. You know, his buddy Carey Price hasn't played. His wife and Carey's wife are friends. His partner Joel Edmondson isn't here. He just looks like a guy who's really unhappy and really frustrated. And as I tweeted last night, he looks like a guy who's playing like he wants to get traded. It's impossible to fathom he got that bad that quick. I think most of his problems are in his head, that I just don't think he's happy. And I think anybody in any job, when you're not happy on your job, you don't perform up to the way you should.
I agree with you, and I think they're going to trade him. I don't think he's going to be on this team next year.
And there'll be a market for him.
He wants out. He'll never admit it because it's just something you don't admit. The team will never admit it because it's just something that you don't admit. It's you know, you don't want to say a player wants out, because then every team sees you coming from a mile away. And then it kind of sends a message around the league that, an important player on your team isn't happy there, so there's something wrong. But he'll be gone.
Petrie being around him, when we were around him in the locker room day to day, he's a really soft-spoken, smart, quiet type of guy, intelligent type of guy. I wrote a column. I was like the kind of guy you want your daughter to marry. Really, just that. So for him to speak out publicly the way he did, frustrated about the system and that, speaks volumes. And I think he wasn't only speaking for himself. I think he was speaking for other guys in the locker room also.
Yeah, I don't have a daughter, but he makes $6 million a year. And that's the kind of guy I'd want my daughter to marry. You're right about that. Sharing is caring. I'll take the next one. Tom says, look at other rebuilds. It took the Rangers 4 years to get here, and they sped things up with Panarin and Adam Fox as free agents. Is a rebuild really worth it if it's 5 years, Tony? Well, if a rebuild brings you a cup, then it's worth it. If it doesn't, it's not. If a rebuild brings you a generational player or a franchise player that gets you out of your seat and is worth watching, yes. And if it doesn't, no. I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball, so I don't know what the future holds, but I will say this. It's Montreal. People are less patient here than anywhere else, and they're not going to do something that is 5 years. They won't do that, okay? So they'll do what you call a reset, which is what the Minnesota Wild did, and the Wild, their reset took probably about less than 3 years. Stu, the next one's for you. Dave K, the Shea Weber's LTIR contract have trade value?
Possible, just when you look back to the Chris Pronger situation, where I think his contract was traded around a bit for the cap hit. He's got a $7.5 million cap hit, but you're only paying him, I think at the end, I think he's making $1 million a year. So if there's a team looking to get up to the minimum NHL salary cap, I guess it is possible.
Next one, I got it. Patrick, who are the Habs right-handed defense prospects? I mean, if we trade Petrie and Weber retires, who will play right D? And that's a real interesting question, because if you take a look at their young players going forward and their best prospects, they're all on the left-hand side.
It's funny how few right-hand defensemen there are. It really is. It's bizarre.
They're all on the left-hand side. That's the problem, right? That's the problem.
But the thing is, Tony, because there's so many left-hand defensemen, there's a lot of them that can play both sides.
You're right about that. Paulie D says, hey, guys, what I'm scared of a rebuild is to be like Edmonton, all the draft picks and still losing. How can we avoid that? Stu?
Yeah, I mean, Edmonton kept drafting a similar type of player with their top picks. And, when you're paying Draisaitl and McDavid the kind of money you're paying them, it's similar like here with Carey Price and Shea Weber. When you're paying that much money for two players, and the Leafs, when they're paying their top players and the salary cap world, it makes it difficult to fill in the other pieces. Edmonton,
just the problem on the team is they went out and they got good players, but they never went out and put together a good team. And it takes different pieces, and they never figured it out. Their goaltending was never good enough. Their defense was never good enough. I think you look at Edmonton and say, okay, we got to do what Edmonton didn't do.
Well, Kent Hughes said in his news conference, the team that wins the Stanley Cup every year isn't the team with the best players on it. And Edmonton's the living, breathing example of that, right? I mean, the Canadians were far from the most talented team in the NHL last year. They got to the Stanley Cup final. Why? Because Carey Price played out of his mind, and they became a team. They bonded as a team as the playoffs went on, and they played that 5-man system that Ducharme kept talking about, which they somehow can't repeat this year. But so having the best players doesn't make you the best team. There's a lot of ingredients that go into that.
This is the Sick Podcast, and it's Brunchin with Marinaro, presented by Cherry River, and Stu Cowan of the Montreal Gazette and Hockey Inside Out is with me. And you can follow the Sick Podcast on the Facebook page, the Sick Podcast, on the Instagram handle, the Sick Podcasts, on Twitter at the Sick Podcast, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's absolutely free. And by the way, there are a bunch of notifications that you can hit on all these social media channels to notify you when we post something, when we upload an episode, and when we go live. Make sure you do that as well. Danielle Salumi, this season has been a write-off and a perfect opportunity to play the young kids. What do you think What do you think of Ducharme not playing Romanov on the power play or in overtime? Stu?
Ducharme's trying to save his job, right? He's trying to, if not with the Canadiens moving forward, that record that he has is horrible to look at. He wants to win, and he thinks that gives him. So it's going to be interesting to see now with Kent Hughes coming in, if he starts saying, okay, I want you to do this. I want to see Romanov on the power play. I want to see him on 3-on-3. I want you to do this. I want you to do that. I wrote a column this week. One of the biggest decisions that Hughes has to make is concerning Dominic Ducharme. Like, there's more than half the season left.
Oh, by the way, you know what the big news is in Montreal today? Patrick Roy has sold his house in Quebec. $6 million, Stu. I have a question for you.
Yeah. Well,
did you buy it?
If you can loan me the money, I will.
Stu, how long you been in the media?
Oh, God. Over 35 years.
At the Montreal Gazette. What's your title right now?
Sports columnist.
You've made over $6 million. All right, okay. Let's back to the questions. I'll take the next one. Mike Garon says, great show, Tony and Stu. Just wondering who will be the candidates for the head of the scouting department. Kent Hughes said right now, Martin Lapointe is there. I wouldn't be surprised if Daniel Doré is brought in, who worked with Kent Hughes, of course, in the past. I wouldn't be surprised. He worked with him in Boston, and then he followed him when he went to New York. That would make sense because, once again, this is a chemistry thing, and you bring people that you're comfortable with, right, and working with. So I wouldn't be surprised. But I'm going to tell you this. Jeff Gordon. Look at this for a second. There's Jeff Gordon. There's Kent Hughes. Jeff Gordon's going to bring in people that he's comfortable with. Kent Hughes is going to bring in people that he's comfortable with. Jeff Gordon brought in Kent Hughes, who he was comfortable with. If Gordon brings in Daniel Doré to be director of amateur scouting, Kent Hughes, I think, has a chance to bring in two people, maybe three. One, his first ever client and very good friend, Vincent Lecavalier. You saw what the Detroit Red Wings did. Nicholas Lidstrom was named an assistant to Steve Yzerman, and he's not even living in Detroit. He's living in Sweden. That's number one. So Vinny could probably do it out of Tampa. Number two, and you know who I'd really like to see the Canadiens bring in if they can to help work with some of the young players. And I spoke with Guy Carbonneau a couple of weeks ago here on the Sick Podcast, and he said he'd be willing to go out and work with some of the centermen on faceoffs. And I thought it was a great idea. You bring in Carbonneau to work with Suzuki, you bring him in to work with Dvorak, you bring him in to work with Jake Evans, Ryan Poehling. Great idea. You bring him in to work with the penalty killers. Great idea. I have an idea to bring in to work with the offensive players and to help out on the power play as well. And I know that it's Alex Burrows' baby on the power play, but I'm talking about someone who can come in and just bring some ideas from the outside and work with some of these offensive players. Martin St. Louis.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and you mentioned Carbonneau too. I mean, as a special teams consultant, I mean, there was no, talk about it all. Great penalty killer, and when he was head coach of the Canadiens, he had the best power play in the NHL. But yeah, I mean, that would make sense. I mean, and Martin St. Louis has been around hockey even since he's coached his kids afterwards. That's a really interesting name.
By the way, Vinny Lecavalier's last 3 years of his career, I believe it was, who was his coach?
I'm trying to think, was he with Philly at the end of his career? I'm trying to remember.
No, with Tampa, or his last 3 years when he was in Tampa.
Yeah,
I don't have his career here in front of me, but when he was with Tampa, Guy Boucher was his coach. And Guy Boucher is, you would think, wants to get back to the National Hockey League. I think there's a chance. That all depends. I mean, Kent's going to pick up the phone. He's going to call Vinny, and he's going to ask him about Guy Boucher. And I'm sure he already knows because I'm sure Vinny's already talked to him about him in the past. But if Vinny enjoyed playing for Guy Boucher, there's a good chance that Guy Boucher could be the next coach if it's not going to be Dominic Ducharme. That is, if there's an endorsement from Vinny, of course.
I threw out a name in a column last week, Jim Montgomery, who played with Hughes at Collège Saint-Laurent. They know each other.
Yeah.
Jim Montgomery did a fantastic job at the University of Denver. Cale Makar played for him. He's developed a lot of young guys. head coach in Dallas. He ran into personal problems there with the alcohol and what. He's cleaned. It seems to have got his life back on track. Assistant coach now with the St. Louis Blues, fluently bilingual, Montreal guy, NHL head coaching experience working with young players in the NCAA level, relationship with Kent Hughes. No, I'm just speculating. I don't have anything to.
Listen,
other than
I know he speaks French, but you're going to give the French media a heart attack here.
they might,
you're going to give them a heart attack.
It just might, but Jeff Molson seems to have gotten to the point where, and honestly, he's not as concerned about that because I think he understands the market and he knows. But I think Jeff Molson wants to win more than anything right now. He realizes this team that he bought for $500 million is now worth more than double that. And not only him, but the other partners in the ownership group don't want to see that value coming down. There's a lot of things coming forward. COVID's going to make it hard for this franchise. It's going to take an economic impact. It already has. Just win, baby. And maybe that's sort of what Molson is these last couple of moves. He knew he was going to take heat for them.
Yeah.
He has. And again, at this point, though, Tony, people playing the language card or people saying he's not a real Quebecer, to me, it's just racist. I mean, it's Kent Hughes, West Island boy, bilingual. His parents speak French. He grew up here. Yeah, he left. So did a lot of other Quebecers. Celine Dion left Quebec. Vinny Lecavalier left Quebec. Daniel Briere left Quebec. So it's
Roberto Luongo.
It was so comfortable in French doing his news conference the other day. It's remarkable and impressive that he didn't lose anything while living 20 years in the U.S. He's obviously still been using it, speaking with clients and whatnot. But at this point, how is Jimmy Montgomery not more of a Quebecer or a Montrealer than, a guy who has a French name? He grew up here, raised here, speaks both languages. But it is what it is, right, Tony?
Yeah, no, it is what it is. Let's get back to the questions. Kyle, is Guy Boucher really considered a modern coach and offensive minded? Well, he has modern ideas, but will he put them into place? It all depends on who you ask, right? A lot of people thought he was the next genius of the power play, and then a lot of people thought this guy's killing hockey, right? They kept on showing the replays of that game between Tampa Bay and the Philadelphia Flyers where, Tampa Bay was just waiting for the Flyers. What was it? Tampa Bay was just sitting back, and they wouldn't attack the Flyers, and they were just sitting back, and the Flyers were saying come, and they were just sitting back and stuff like that. And, what they were doing is they were playing counterattack hockey is what they were doing.
One of the knocks on Guy Boucher is that he was just too intense as a coach, right? He was on guys like all the time, and eventually like, okay, enough. They're NHL players. I'm sure he's learned like over time, like he's
for sure
have to change that. But that's why I mentioned Jimmy Montgomery, a guy who has experience dealing with young guys at the university level and coming up, and maybe not. It's going to take. Sometimes you need to give the guys a kick in the butt, and sometimes you give them a pat on the back, right? And especially in a rebuild and bringing young guys in, the coach is going to be a teacher more than a coach for the first part of this rebuild, right? You're going to have to have the players trust you, like you to an extent. I mean, and be able to get your message through to a young group of players.
Back to the questions we go. Let's go to Mike. This one's for you, Stu. Who's the Habs' best prospect in the system right now?
Boy, that's a good. Well, I'm going to say Jordan Harris. We mentioned him before because I remember rookie camp or development camp was before COVID, so it must have been 3 years ago. And I went and I was sitting in Brossard, and I'm watching, and you don't really know who these kids are, right? Most of them, like you're looking down at your sheet.
Of course.
Who's that guy? And one guy caught my eye, and it was Jordan Harris. I wrote a column about it. If you Google my name of Jordan Harris, you'll find it. And I was like, who is this kid? Rushing the puck, confident with the puck, head up, skating, agility. I was like, what? Like he just stood out. That's 3 years ago, if I'm not mistaken, the year after they drafted him. And he just really, he stood out from everybody else on the ice. 3 years later now, he's been captain at Northeastern. He's more experienced. So I'm going to say him.
He's a top 5 defenseman, not in the NHL right now, on everyone's list.
I go back to that, and it's rare at those development camps that somebody you go, wow. The other guy, Cole Caulfield, I remember the first time he came down the wing and shot the puck. I went, wow, what a shot this kid has. But Jordan Harris, it wasn't just that one moment. It wasn't just, wow, what a shot. It was like, wow, 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 wow. Like every time he had the puck, I was sort of going, wow.
Yeah. I think Caulfield's the best prospect, but I can understand the question because Caulfield's here and Jordan Harris is not. So it's your best prospect not in the NHL. You can look at it that way as well. I'll take the next one. Let's go. Says MAN22. Would Benoit Gros be a good choice for a head coach? I think yes. He'll be in the mix for sure. He'll be in the mix. I mean, once again, that's also a connection that Kent Hughes, Vinny Lecavalier knows well because Benoit Gros is the coach for the Syracuse Crunch. I think that I'm not so sure if Benoit Gros number 2 on the Canadiens list. I think he would have been number 2 on Matthew Darsh's list because I think Boucher would have been 1 and Gros would have been 2. And I'm not so sure if Gros will be number 2 on the Canadiens list. But once again, he's in the top 5. We haven't even talked about Pascal Vincent yet, but I think Vincent's in that top 5. I think Montgomery's in that top 5. I think Gros in that top 5. I think Boucher's in that top 5. Stu's, the next one's for you. It's Brunchin with Marinaro. Mike Garon, do you think there's a position for Mark Hunter in the organization?
I think it would take a lot to get him out of London. That they run like that's the brothers, that's their franchise, that's their baby, that's everything. But if they could add him, yeah, I think he'd be a great addition. But I'm not sure. I think that London franchise, they built something special there, and I'm not sure how willing or how much he wants to leave that.
He would obviously be a home run, but I think if they were going to hire him, he probably would have had Gorton's job and brought in his people. I don't know. I don't think he will be, but if they could get him, he'd obviously be a home run. Stu, next one's for you. Says Biggie, what do you guys think of trying to bring in Alex Kovalev to help the power play and the offensive side of the game in general?
No.
No. And I'd rather bring in Martin St. Louis. As good as Kovalev was on the power play, St. Louis was just as good. St. Louis is from the province of Quebec, and St. Louis brought it every night. And if you want a culture to be and listen, I love Alex Kovalev, but I mean, he showed up once every 5 games. I mean, let's be honest, because if he would have played every game the same, he would have been a top 5 player in the National Hockey League. And he never was, unfortunately.
No. A
top 5 talent, maybe, but never a top 5 player. Others. Bob, I know we all want Gallagher and Price moved, but what Bergevin legacy albatross contract is most likely to be the first gone?
I'm not 100% certain I want Gallagher gone. If Gallagher wants to stay here, as I mentioned before, as a captain and a leader of this group moving forward, I wouldn't be in a rush to move him. I also would listen to whatever offers I can get because that contract with his body and the wear and tear, that contract's probably not going to be very pretty near the end. Having said that, Brendan Gallagher has earned every single dollar he will ever earn from the Canadiens. The reason he's so banged up is because he plays 100% every single shift he's on the ice. He's not worried about getting hurt. He's out there. But I think everything sort of that Carey Price thing is the elephant in the room, right? That contract is just hanging over them. $10.5 million, full no trade clause. So I think everything starts with, can you move that contract? And that's if they can, and if we can move it, how much of that cap hit are we going to have to eat? Because they're going to have to eat a lot of it. And then I think after that, everything else sort of factors into who you can afford, who you can't afford to keep, what you're going to do moving forward. So I'd say the first contract situation you got to figure out and try and move is Carey Price.
All right, I think the next one is going to be the last one. There's a bunch of them waiting, but I think we're going to cap it in an hour. After all, it is NFL Sunday. And Stu's devastated that Aaron Rodgers got eliminated last night. Guess not. Nicholas Brown. Do you think Nick Suzuki is the next captain of the Habs? I don't think so. Yeah. I don't think they want to put that pressure on him with an 8-year deal and all that money. I think they want to give it a couple of years. So I think there will be a transition captain for a couple of years before it becomes Nick Suzuki.
Yeah, Suzuki has all the qualities to be a captain, though, in this market, too. He understands how this market works. He understands what the Canadiens mean to the city. He understands the passion. He understands how to deal with the media. From my perspective, it's been a lot of fun watching Nick Suzuki from the first day he came here in the locker room, looking a bit like a deer in the headlights and like afraid of what he was going to say and watching his words and scared almost when he was being interviewed, to where he is now, where he's becoming more comfortable, more confident, showing more of his personality. He can be funny at times. He has all the qualities to be a captain and a leader of this team. But I agree with you, Tony. I think there needs to be an interim. Somebody else, I think, needs to wear the C before that. When I mentioned Patrick Bergeron before, perfect example of a guy coming in, or a Gallagher, be captain for a couple of years, and then whenever those guys move on or whatever, then I think Suzuki is the next longtime captain of the Canadiens.
I've been told that there might be 2 or 3 of them that are going to make us chuckle. So very, very quickly, MJV. Tony, the next thing you need is to get to put on your hoodie is "You lose to win." The tank works. All right. Okay. Very, very good. Others. AP. Tony and Stu, the 2 goats. Thank you very much. I agree with you 100%, by the way. And is there another one that'll make us laugh here? By the way, I didn't think that was funny. I thought that was the truth. Okay. That's it. And a little joke there on Aaron Rodgers. Why do the Titans and the Habs always break my heart? You want to know why? Because neither of them have a quarterback. How about that?
Yeah, it's, you know what, it's one of the beauties of sports, though, right, Tony? The teams you love will break your heart. They'll bring you the Canadiens from last season, the high that the fans were on, the parties outside the Bell Center, the city coming to life. It was the greatest thing in the world, to where we are now. That's pro sports. That's part of what makes them fantastic. You're right about that, Stu. Enjoy your NFL today. Thanks again for doing this, as we do most Sundays between 11:30 a.m. and just past 12:30 p.m. It's Brunchin with Marinaro. He's Stu Cowan. It's the Sick Podcast. Have a great day, Stu. You too, Tony. Follow us on all our social media platforms, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's absolutely for free. It's the Sick Podcast. Happy Sunday.